Never judge someone who has weird social behaviors, especially if they're a victim of narcissistic abuse. Navigating life after experiencing such trauma can be incredibly challenging, and the way someone interacts with the world often reflects their past experiences. Those who have endured narcissistic abuse might exhibit behaviors that seem odd or extreme to outsiders, but these quirks are usually coping mechanisms developed to protect themselves. Today we'll explore 10 of these unusual social behaviors. Are you ready for number 1? Disconnection during conversations. When you're talking to someone who has been through narcissistic abuse, you might notice they sometimes zone out or seem lost in thought. It isn't because they don't care. It's often a way for them to cope with feelings that can be overwhelming. As psychologist Dr. Judith Orloff explains, survivors of emotional trauma can disconnect as a defense mechanism to protect themselves from pain. Their mind might drift to a safer place, especially if they often face criticism or invalidation. So, if they seem distant during your conversation, remember that it's their way of dealing with the emotional fallout, not a reflection of your worth or the importance of what you're saying. Let's talk about number 2. Hyper-responsiveness to social cues. Narcissistic abuse victims seem sensitive to social cues. They might pick up on things others overlook. They read too much into a raised eyebrow or a sigh. This hyper-responsiveness can come from past experiences where every little detail mattered for their emotional survival. As life coach Dr. Lisa Firestone points out, people who have experienced emotional abuse often develop a heightened sensitivity to the feelings and reactions of others. Their radar is always on, trying to avoid potential conflict or rejection. So, if they seem overly cautious or interpret something you said as unfavorable, it's likely a reflection of their past rather than your intentions. Let's move on to number 3. Sudden emotional outbursts. Sudden emotional outbursts are common among narcissistic abuse victims. It can be surprising and confusing, but it's often a result of their past experiences where emotions got bottled up or dismissed. As Dr. Tara Brach says, unprocessed emotions can bubble up unexpectedly, often triggered by seemingly small things. Their reactions might seem intense because they've learned to suppress feelings for so long that it's like a dam breaking when they finally surface. So, if they suddenly burst into tears or lash out, try to understand that it's not just about the moment. It's their way of dealing with deep-seated pain that might have been ignored for too long. Now, let's continue to number 4. Unusual humor. Narcissistic abuse victims have a unique sense of humor that can be pretty dark or self-deprecating. They often use jokes to lighten the mood or deflect tension, which can be their way of coping with uncomfortable feelings. It's like a shield they put up to protect themselves. Dr. Marcia Reynolds explains, humor can be a powerful tool for those who have experienced pain. It allows them to regain some control over their emotions. So, when they crack a joke that seems heavy or pokes fun at themselves, it's not just ordinary humor. Their way of processing experiences might still feel too raw or painful. Understanding this can help you see their laughter as a sign of resilience rather than just a punchline. You can't miss number 5. Compulsive caretaking. Narcissistic abuse. Victims often try to fix other people's problems, almost like it's a reflex. This compulsive caretaking can come from their past, where they felt the need to manage situations to feel safe or valued. As Dr. Jennifer Freyd explains, those who have been abused often become hyper-focused on others' needs as a way to avoid their pain. They might think that by helping others, they can find some control or approval that they didn't get when they needed it. So, if you see them jumping in to solve someone else's issues, it's not just about being helpful, it's also a way for them to cope with their own experiences and emotions. Understanding this can help you appreciate their intentions while reminding them that taking care of themselves is okay. Are you still up for number 6? Inconsistency in social media use. When you're friends with someone who has experienced narcissistic abuse, you might notice they're super active on social media one day and then completely disappear the next. This inconsistency often comes from their emotional ups and downs. They may share a lot when feeling good, but pull back when overwhelmed or anxious. As psychologist Dr. Ramani Devasala points out, those who have experienced emotional trauma often struggle with boundaries, leading to erratic behaviors online. So, if they fluctuate between posting frequently and going silent, remember it reflects their emotional journey, not their feelings about you. Let's keep it moving to number 7. Nervous habits. When you're chatting with someone who has experienced narcissistic abuse, you might notice they have some nervous habits, like fidgeting, tapping their fingers, or playing with their hair. These behaviors can be their way of managing anxiety or stress that bubbles up from their past experiences. As Dr. Laura B. Paulak says, nervous habits often serve as coping mechanisms for people dealing with unresolved trauma. It's like their body is trying to find a way to soothe the emotional discomfort they might not even be fully aware of. So, if you see them fidgeting a lot, it's not necessarily about being rude or uninterested. It's just their way of coping with feelings that can sometimes feel overwhelming. Understanding this can help you be more supportive and patient as they navigate their feelings. Here comes number 8. Unusual jealousy. If you're close to someone who has experienced narcissistic abuse, you might notice they can get unusually jealous over seemingly harmless things like you hanging out with other friends. This intense jealousy often stems from deep-seated insecurities and fears formed during their abusive experiences. Psychologist Dr. Kristen Neff explains that those who have faced emotional trauma may struggle with feelings of worthlessness, leading to heightened jealousy as a way to protect themselves. Their past makes them sensitive to perceived threats, even when none exist. So if they react strongly to something small, it's likely tied to their history, not you. Being understanding and reassuring can help them feel more secure in your relationship. Moving on to number 9. Difficulty engaging with new people. Narcissistic abuse victims seem hesitant to engage with new people or participate in group activities. That reluctance often comes from a deep fear of being judged or rejected, stemming from past experiences where their worth was constantly questioned. As Dr. Judith Herman points out, survivors of trauma may find it hard to trust others, making social situations feel overwhelming. They're always on guard, worried about how they'll be received. So, if you see them holding back in a group setting, it's not that they don't want to connect. They're just navigating their feelings of vulnerability. Being patient and encouraging them gently can help them feel more comfortable as they work through these challenges. Finally, we're down to number 10, easily triggered. Getting easily triggered by certain words or actions is common among narcissistic abuse victims because they remind them of their past trauma. This strong reaction can seem out of nowhere, but it's often because their brain is wired to protect them from familiar and unsafe situations. As trauma expert Dr. Bessel van der Kolk explains, trauma can reshape how we experience the world, making us overreact to reminders of our pain. So, if they suddenly get upset or anxious over something that seems minor, it's just their way of coping with deep-seated fears. Understanding this can help you be more empathetic and supportive, reminding them that expressing their feelings is okay and that you're there for them. In conclusion, understanding the weird social behaviors of those affected by narcissistic abuse can help us foster compassion and support for them. It's important to remember that what might seem strange on the surface often has deep roots in their trauma. Being patient and empathetic can create a safe space for them to express themselves and heal. So, the next time you notice someone reacting differently in social situations, take a moment to consider their journey. Together, we can help break the cycle of stigma and encourage healing for those who face the challenges of narcissistic abuse.